All right, buckle up, because I'm about to lay it all bare. In December 1962, Queen Elizabeth II sat through a sprawling 222-minute cut of Lawrence of Arabia, a cinematic colossus untouched by compromise. 3 weeks later, that version vanished into thin air, like a desert phantom swallowed by the sands. Producer Sam Spiegel, with the cunning of a seasoned hustler, sliced off 20 minutes to jam in extra screenings, each cut minute funneling $50,000 straight into his pockets. For 27 years, the world watched a gutted film, blissfully unaware of the betrayal. Those missing scenes didn't just alter the narrative. They buried the raw, unfiltered truth of T. Lawrence, a man whose brutality sent test audiences scrambling for the exits in horror. Today, we're ripping open Hollywood's vault to expose what was hidden for profit, piecing together the saga of a film that nearly broke its creators and the man it portrayed. The Lawrence of Arabia project was a house of cards ready to collapse before a single frame was shot in early 1960. Michael Wilson, a blacklisted screenwriter working under the radar for Spiegel, delivered the first draft. But when director David Lean read it in Jordan's blistering desert, he stormed off the set, calling it an unfilmable mess. His exit left a fully paid crew baking in the dunes, with Columbia Pictures threatening to pull the plug unless a new script materialized pronto. In a desperate move, Spiegel roped in Robert Bolt, a celebrated playwright who'd never touched a screenplay. Bolt warned he'd need to tear the story down to its bones and rebuild it. Lean returned to London, and the two dove into a feverish creative marathon, Bolt churning out pages by day, dissecting them with Lean over late-night whiskey and smoke-filled debates. Rewritten scenes were ferried to the desert crew each dawn via a system they dubbed Camel Mail, a lifeline of paper crossing the sands. By November 1962, Wilson's script was a ghost. Less than 10% of his dialogue survived. What began as a script that couldn't cross the dunes became the bedrock of a cinematic titan. But the script was just the start of the chaos. The production's $15 million budget made it the most expensive British film of its era, a gamble Spiegel personally bankrolled, covering every overrun himself. In a sweltering tent under flickering generator lights, he hunched over a makeshift desk, signing payment slips for over 1,000 Bedouin extras, 300 camels, 150 horse wranglers, and a small army of crew. The set buzzed with whispers of Spiegel's folly, but the risk paid off spectacularly, hauling in $46 million in worldwide rentals and wiping out Spiegel's debts in just 15 months. Before any of this, David Lean was a man teetering on the edge of surrender. After Bridge on the River Kwai soared in 1957, he spent 2 years chasing a Gandhi film that crumbled to nothing, leaving him ready to abandon directing. Then Spiegel called with a vision, not just a biopic of Lawrence, but a meditation on the desert as a mirror of his fractured psyche. That spark reignited Lean's obsession. He fixated on weaving the desert's heat haze into the story's soul, most famously in Sheriff Ali's entrance, captured with a 482mm lens that compressed the shimmering horizon into a lone, mythic figure. It took 4 grueling days, frying multiple camera motors, but when Lean saw the footage, he knew he'd crafted something eternal. Retirement was off the table. Columbia executives, however, were racked with doubt. They feared the film's deliberate pace and introspective tone would flop in America's popcorn-driven market. So they secretly commissioned 2 uncredited writers to churn out a crowd-pleasing alternative. Their script tossed in a fictional American hero, a syrupy love story, and a flag-waving finale straight out of a studio playbook. When it landed in Jordan in September 1961, Lean dubbed it Hollywood sludge and shredded it in front of the crew, a defiant act of artistic rebellion. Bolt later swore he never wrote a single romantic line, crediting Lean for preserving the desert's stark purity. The crew nicknamed the discarded draft Operation Sabotage, its pages lost until they resurfaced in Columbia's archives decades later. Casting was a battlefield of its own. When Peter O'Toole's screen test hit Columbia's desks in February 1961, execs dismissed him as a pretty face with no depth. Lean erupted, insisting O'Toole was Lawrence incarnate. He ordered a second test, O'Toole bellowing lines from 7 pillars of wisdom while firing a Webley revolver, his intensity crackling through the frame. Sent overnight to Hollywood, it spooked the studio chief, who wired back. The kid's a force of nature. He's in. O'Toole was hired for £15,000, a steal compared to Cary Grant's £180,000 ask at age 57. Before O'Toole, Marlon Brando was in the ring, demanding $1 million plus 10% of the gross, fresh off his record-breaking mutiny on the Bounty payday. Spiegel scoffed, and Brando fired back, calling him a Hollywood vulture and mailing a postcard from Tahiti. Desert's too hot. Try Fiji. The talks collapsed. On set, the drama never let up. Anthony Quinn rolled into Aqaba in July 1961 to find his role as Auda Abu Tayyib gutted to make room for Omar Sharif's Sheriff Ali. Furious, Quinn threatened to bolt unless his 23 wounds monologue was restored. Lean struck a deal. Quinn kept his speech and landed a searing close-up, while Sharif held on to his iconic desert entrance. Their feud simmered for months, with crew dubbing their camel caravans the Quinn-o-meter for the tempers that flared when scenes shifted focus. Alec Guinness, cast as Prince Faisal, kept his misgivings under wraps. Letters from 1962, later published, reveal his unease with brown-face makeup, fearing he'd look like a grotesque effigy. He accepted the £100,000 role, but quietly pleaded with Lean to light him softly, aiming for an ethereal presence rather than caricature. Claude Rains faced a trial by fire. On August 1st, 1961, he was pulled from a New Hampshire vacation after Robert Newton, slated for Dryden, died of a heart attack. Flown to Jordan, Rains had 2 weeks to prep, learning lines in a Jeep with script pages taped to the dashboard. For hours after landing, he was in costume, delivering lines under the desert sun. On December 10, 1962, London. The truth emerged in 1989 when the restored cut revealed the film's full depth. The 1963 Oscars showered the 202-minute version with 7 awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, with voters oblivious to the missing pieces. Lean stayed mum, but in 1989, he endorsed the restored cut as his true vision. One devastating cut set the tone. Lean's original opened not with a motorcycle's roar, but with Lawrence's shattered goggles hanging from a tree near his 1935 crash site, a haunting symbol meant to echo in the desert, tying his death to his journey. Sliced in 1962, those 16 seconds broke the film's cyclical soul, turning a fated tragedy into a random accident. Lean, a former editor, treated each frame as sacred. When he learned of the cut during sound mixing, he fired off a memo calling it cinematic sacrilege, refusing to speak to Spiegel for nearly a year, communicating only through aides, even during the Oscar campaign. In 1988, restoring the goggles was his first demand. They weren't mere props. They signaled Lawrence's reckless dance with danger, underscored by a subtle metallic jingle in Jar's score, later echoed in a desert wind scene. Editor N.V. Coates, an Oscar winner for the film, said cutting those 384 frames haunted her, costing 30% of the film's visual motifs. She found them in a British vault for the 1988 restoration, painstakingly reattaching them. The darkest erasure was Lawrence's 1917 Dero assault, detailed in 7 pillars of wisdom. The original script depicted his stripping, beating, and rape by the Turkish governor with unflinching clarity. The 1962 cut reduced it to vague groping, a lingering stare, and muted violence, softening the horror. This dulled the context for Lawrence's later brutality at Tafas, making it seem like a sudden snap rather than trauma's aftermath. Jose Ferrer's chilling turn as the Bay, with lines like "a man cannot always be uniform," delivered with a smirk, was gutted in the 1971 187-minute re-release, leaving a hollow silence where menace once loomed. Censorship boards, skittish about implied sexual violence, especially between a white man and a Middle Eastern captor, pressured Spiegel to sanitize it. He went further, slashing 40 extra seconds to secure a market-friendly rating. The cuts dimmed O'Toole's post-assault scene. A subtle wince, a faltering breath, a trembling hand buttoning his uniform, robbing his arc of its shattering weight. Even in the 1989 restoration, lost sound reels meant some lines were gone forever. The Tafas massacre's full horror was also buried. Lean filmed Lawrence ordering the cold execution of wounded Turks with knives to save bullets, a chilling act of calculation. Test audiences in 1962 recoiled, and Spiegel cut 8 minutes of dialogue, including Lawrence's icy, "I enjoyed it," after killing Gassim, and a detailed monologue reveling in the thrill of death. Scenes of Ali and Ada confronting Lawrence's dissent, Ali saying, "You've become what you despised," were axed, making the Arab coalition's collapse seem like a cultural rift rather than Lawrence's moral decay. Lean's notes to Spiegel grappled with whether audiences could cheer for a man guilty of war crimes, like destroying medical supplies and denying water to wounded Turks. Including those scenes would have recast Lawrence not as a flawed hero, but as a dark antihero. Spiegel's cuts were a calculated heist. Each minute shaved added $50,000 to his coffers, turning the 222-minute epic into a 202-minute cash cow for 3 daily screenings. He spun a lie that Lean was absent, but Coates later admitted Lean watched helplessly as Spiegel, controlling the funds, dismantled his work. Spiegel scattered the footage across vaults to thwart restoration, a move some whispered was insurance fraud, claiming lost reels for payouts while hiding them. By 1986, when Robert A. Harris began the restoration, he faced a labyrinth, 6,000 pounds of mislabeled, decaying film scattered across continents. In January 1987, he found the lost scenes in a trim can, a near miracle after years of searching. Rebuilding was grueling. Some footage lacked sound, others were degraded. O'Toole and Guinness redubbed lines they hadn't spoken in decades, while Lean, then 80, returned in 1988 to oversee the 216-minute cut, reclaiming his vision. The $600,000 restoration, plus $2 million for prints and promotion, used bleeding-edge tech to match 26-year-old footage with new prints. Steven Spielberg, who'd been spellbound by the film as a teen in Phoenix, championed the effort as AFI preservation co-chair, securing Columbia's cooperation and fundraising through 1989 premieres in New York, Washington, and Los Angeles. A 2012 digital restoration for the 50th anniversary